Okay.
Right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for spending a portion of your Friday morning with us. It's exciting for me to be moderating a panel on the science of reading and literacy because this is a very compelling and timely subject, specifically as we think about post-COVID academic learning loss and the recovery. My name is David Lloyd, and I serve as Deputy Chief of Programs for Economic Mobility at Martha's Table in Washington, D.C. I have the great honor of leading implementation and operation of a program portfolio that includes direct community investments, such as our cash transfer programs and children's savings accounts programs, entrepreneurship support, which is highlighted by our community kitchen program, and finally, awesome career pathway programs such as the Advancing Early Education Collaborative, which Martha's Table has the pleasure of collaborating with Youth Invest Partners, American University, Trinity Washington University, Lift DC, and Urban Institute to execute. For those that may not be quite as familiar with the Advancing Early Education Collaborative, otherwise known as AEEC, it offers a seamless academic pathway and wraparound supports for Black and Latina women in Wards 7 and 8 looking to start or advance their careers in early care education, excuse me. As an organization that offers early care and education services in Ward 8 of Washington, D.C., and that supports and employs educators, community members, and young children, this discussion today on the science of reading is extremely relevant. Much thanks to Youth Invest Partners, formerly known as Venture Philanthropy Partners, putting this panel together. They invest in systemic change by collaborating with community, business, government, and nonprofit partners to build better life outcomes for youth. They are heavily involved in the early learning space and backbone to many collaboratives, such as the Advancing Early Education Collaborative that I spoke about a few moments ago. More specifically, they partner with 20 Degrees with the Shared Services Plus program to provide capacity building support, in addition to back office resources to ensure early childcare centers are financially resilient, which is critical. In addition to the amazing Shared Services Plus initiative, Youth Invest Partners backbones the Early Learning Collaborative Action Network in DC, and is also the state lead for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. We certainly appreciate them for bringing this group of people together today from the various initiatives to allow for a meaningful conversation on moving the needle on third grade reading proficiency. Grade level reading, as we know, is fundamental to learning and creates a pathway for lifelong learning. This outcome is predictive of a young person's future academic success, contributing to a successful transition to adulthood and a happy, healthy, thriving life. To achieve that, we know that so many factors are at play, such as teacher preparation, among many others. So we're excited today to learn from experts on what we need to do as a city and a nation to set up our children for success to become excellent readers. So before we get started, I want to ground us in some terms about what we mean when we talk about literacy instruction. To do that, I'll turn it over to Kristen, who's one of our panelists today from the great state of Mississippi, to explain the terminology. Kristen, take it away.
Thank you and good morning. So this is a slide that we use primarily with our teacher trainings, our professional developments in Mississippi at the local level, but it really gives a simplistic overview of the basics of the science of reading. So lots of times we like to use the terminology interchange. So when you're thinking of the science of reading, you're thinking of the body of research, of scientifically based research about reading and writing, specifically on how students learn to read, why students have some difficulty reading, and how we can effectively instruct and assess our students. So that's the research, the science. So the formula and the components utilized within the science, the simple view of reading. And the simple view is the formula that tells us that word recognition times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. So that's the formula, the theoretical or conceptual model reading, excuse me. The components are parsed out through Scarborough's rope. And so Scarborough's rope really parse out the word recognition or word reading component of the simple view. It gives the components that lie within that particular area, and then the language comprehension components. What does that look like within those particular areas? And then the approach, the application of the science is called structured literacy. So we know that across our country, we have been working with schools and districts and that really focus on balanced literacy. So we're moving within the confines of structured literacy. So this is just a basic overview of the science of reading. So you have the research, which is the science, the formula, which is the simple view, the components within the simple view, which are outlined in Scarborough's Road, and the approach, which is structured literacy.
Wow, Kristen, thank you so much for that context and framing. We definitely look forward to hearing more from you in a little bit. So as we jump into the panel, I'm encouraging all of you in the audience to enter this conversation today with the lens about how you as educators work with our youngest learners on reading and literacy. We welcome you to the chat to share your thoughts. We're also aiming to have some time after the panel for questions, but feel free to post them in the chat as we go about. And we will try to record those so that we can address them during the question and answer period. So let's take a moment to hear from some of our panelists. And you see those awesome images there of our panelists. These panelists are a great representation of the various systems and roles that are so interconnected and truly integral to supporting our earliest learners and the educators that serve them. First is Dr. Shareen Fernanders, Director of Literacy Strategy for DC Public Schools and adjunct faculty with the American University School of Education. Dr. Fernanders, I welcome you to share a little bit about yourself and your role.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Really excited to be here and spend time with you all. So I come to DC from New York. I started in 2002 as a New York City teaching fellow, and I've taught across grades, kindergarten through 8, have been a reading specialist for several years, was a literacy coach for several years, and am now working in the district office of District of Columbia schools as really focused on how can we increase implementation of research and evidence-based practices so that every student has access to high quality literacy instruction. And so a lot of initiatives related to that role.
Awesome, thank you for that. You organically started to address my next question, but if you can provide some background on this intersection between science of reading and early childhood education, and more specifically, what are the implications in early childhood centers?
Thanks for asking that. And that's work that we're really doing now, internalizing the research around the science of reading and thinking about what that means in the early childhood space. But one of the things we know is that phonemic awareness as well as vocabulary are 2 really critical skills that can prevent that if students become proficient at, can prevent later reading difficulties. And oral language and vocabulary and phonemic awareness are early skills that are built developmentally in those early childhood years. And so when we think about what does the early childhood educator need to know, you definitely want to know what contributes to literacy development, but specifically, how can I make sure that students are walking away knowing what sounds, what letters and sounds are, and that you're incorporating tasks like songs and games so that they know that individual sounds and how to manipulate those in early childhood classrooms, but also that you are having complex conversations with children to build a vocabulary and introducing them to new words so that when they are exiting your space and entering kindergarten, they are ready and prepared to learn all of the other sort of more structured literacy instruction.
Awesome, thank you for that. Over to Martha's table to impart some of that knowledge upon us and our instructors here. So don't be surprised if I tap you separately just to see if we can make that happen. All right. So a fellow partner in the campaign for grade level reading is Kristen D. Wynn, who you all heard from a few moments ago. Kristen has served as the State Literacy Director for the Mississippi Department of Education. Kristen, can you share a little bit about yourself and your role, current and previous?
Certainly. My name is Kristen Wynn. I currently serve as the State Literacy Director in Mississippi. Prior to stepping into this role, our early literacy initiative came into play around 2013. And that early literacy policy and initiative is called our Literacy-Based Promotion Act. At that time, I transitioned out of a school district in Mississippi to the role of a literacy coach. And our governor, with the inception of that policy, our governor really wanted 75 literacy coaches across our state to serve the lowest performing schools within our state. But what happened is there were about 600 applicants for those positions. And the first day in the fall, when we walked into the Department of Education, there were only 24 of us. So that spoke volumes of what was happening across our state in 2013 when we were really looking at literacy instruction. At that time, we were 49th when you looked at NAEP scores in 2013. The surrounding states, I guess the running joke was, thank God for Mississippi, because we were at literally the bottom. And so we knew then not being able to recruit 75 coaches was a story, something that we really needed to look into what was happening across our state in regard to literacy. And so we had to change that perception. We had to change what was happening in our classrooms. We had to change what was happening in our pre-service programs. And so we had to work to do a complete overhaul of literacy instruction in Mississippi. So I was fortunate to serve and be a part of that work from the very beginning as a literacy coach. Then I moved to a regional coordinator, then an assistant state coordinator role, and then I moved to the state literacy director role. It has really been a great piece of work that we've done. We've really done a lot of work in Mississippi. I would have to say what gets the most spotlight is our third grade reading assessment. However, there is so much more to our story than that. Our students and teachers have done a phenomenal job in really, really making sure that students are ready by the time they leave third grade, because we know that reading is not only an educational issue, it's an economic issue. And if students aren't reading proficiently by the third grade, we know that they are more likely to drop out of school, and those numbers significantly increase with our minority students and our students in poverty. So I'm excited to share our work and our strategy around literacy in Mississippi.
Thank you so much. And first, I just want to applaud you on an individual level for your contributions and your leadership towards increasing literacy in the state of Mississippi. It's abundantly clear that you and your team of colleagues there are doing amazing work, and I commend you all from your friends up here in DC. All right, so next up is Dr. Toks Fashola from the School of Education at American University in DC. Dr. T, please tell us a little bit about yourself, and your role.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I usually mute myself because I do like to talk. My name is Toks Fashola. I serve a few roles. My first role is I'm a research professor at American University, and I do research in STEM, a number of areas, but one of my areas is literacy acquisition, especially bilingual literacy acquisition and early childhood education. My second role is I am a faculty member in the Child Development Associate Program. So we work closely with David and Martha's Table and partners here. And then I also serve as the coordinator for dual enrollment at American University. And with dual enrollment, we are a part of the Teacher Pipeline Program. And one of our goals is to recruit students in the 12th grade, DC public schools or DC public charter schools to then come in, they take classes in the fall, one class in the fall, one class in the spring, and then they move on. And if they get accepted, we encourage them to enter the teacher pipeline and become teachers who will then go back into DC public schools and teach teachers.
Awesome. It's a perfect segue to my next question, Dr. T. And I want to dig a little bit more into what are universities, and specifically American, what are you guys doing to prepare the teachers?
Oh, okay. All right. So this is a little bit of a complicated question, right? To prepare teachers in terms of literacy, it's a broad question. I can speak to what the CDA program is doing at American University. In other words, early childhood education, right? At AU, we have a developmental approach to learning in the CDA program. It consists of concepts and theories such as critical literacy, metacognition, and emergent literacy, allowing children to freely explore their understanding of the different components of literacy. So we talk about open writing, creative writing, even if they don't know how to spell. We talk about library time, where we key in critical literacy, which means, you know, when you read to children or when children read to you or when children read with you, have them ask questions. I talk about that because the love of reading is not necessarily going to teach you how to read, but the love of reading is going to follow you and it's going to make you want to read some more, right? So that's one area that we work on, developmentally appropriate. We have them do bibliographies. We look at books that are relevant to and respect the cultures of the children in the preschool. On the other side, though, we do believe in the science of reading, right? We do believe in, you know, focusing on some aspects of science of reading, such as phonemic awareness and phonology. We do believe in things like reading aloud, as we said before, but also playing games, as Dr. Fernanders said, that talk about, you know, what rhymes with this, adding songs, adding music. The goal of early childhood education and the CDA is to get them ready for reading, to prepare them. There are two key things that we know. And I'm going to talk about three populations, then I'll stop. Vocabulary is a big predictor of reading success. Vocabulary is a big predictor. Another big predictor is phonemic awareness and phonology. Play all kinds of games. And then finally, including the family, bringing the family, including the library, talking about the library. When I was a Head Start teacher, we let children borrow books from home and take them. We gave them magazines. But I also want to segue finally to two underrepresented populations. Research has shown that with African-American males, there are three things that are big predictors of reading. And those things are self-regulation, the ability to code switch, and once again, phonology and phonemic desegmentation. The trajectory goes this way or that way, and I will remember to cite the sources. We also have a lot of bilingual children, especially in DC. We have a lot of newcomers, and it's important for teachers not necessarily to learn the new language, but to understand the relationship between graphemes and phonemes in English and in the child's language. I'm going to pause and then we'll go on later. But that's what I have for now, and I'll mute myself. I'm passionate about this topic.
I love it. I can feel it. You know, I'm over here. You got me going, Dr. T. But I really appreciate you uplifting how you all at American really build a love of reading or a love for reading using those concepts that you spoke to. So finally, we have an early childhood center leader, Dominique Spencer, Deputy Director at Jubilee JumpStart. Dominique, can you tell us a little bit about you and your role?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Dominique. I have been involved in the early childhood education scene in DC for a little over 20 years. I sort of grew up knowing I wanted to be a teacher and went to school for that. And in between finishing school and starting my first job, I thought I needed more practical experience. So I was like, okay, I'll go work in a childcare setting and get some experience before I go to what I called real school to teach real students, which was elementary school. And so I started working at a childcare center, and that was over 20 years ago. And so once I started working in the childcare center, I realized that the that the childcare stage, children 0 to 5 were the ones who needed the most attention, because that's when the most brain development was happening. And I knew of so many brilliant early childhood childcare teachers who pursued their degree and moved on to elementary school. But I knew that we needed to make a way to have dynamic teachers remain in early childhood education, because it was so important. And so I've spent a lot of years advocating for that and just championing childcare in the city, and especially high quality childcare. I believe that that's a right for every child, and I've been working to make that happen for children in DC, no matter what side of the park you live in or what side of the river you live on. And so that's a real big focus of mine. As far as literacy and bringing that to the classroom, Jubilee JumpStart is a dual language program. And so we honor that by just talking a lot. And we feel that the more language and vocabulary you bring to a child in their native language, but also in the language that they're trying to learn, the better off they are.
Thank you for that. And certainly want to applaud your efforts to champion childcare in the city. And I firmly agree with your position that it is a right for every child. It's incredibly important. So Dominique, you started speaking to what you all are doing there in terms of the Jubilee, but I wanted to ask, what are you seeing as the needs for the teachers who come to your center? And I guess, how are you addressing them?
Sure. So when I originally started my teacher program, and it was in the late 90s, and during that time, we didn't receive, although I was in an early childhood teacher program, we didn't receive much information on children birth through 5. All the literature and all the teachings and every book we had focused on kindergarten and up. And then in 2015, when I went back to school, that was the same thing. And so now I'm hearing from teachers who are in programs, CDA and college programs, that continues to be the same. There's very little information about infant, toddler, and 3 to 5-year-olds in teacher programs. And so that's one of the hardest things to fight again. I definitely want to send a shout out to Dr. Fashola, because from what she's saying about her American University program, it seems that they are using their CDA program in the right way to make sure that their teachers are getting that basic knowledge. And so that has been a struggle, having teachers come in who love children, who want to care for children, but who still need help with educating children. And at our age range, 0 to 5, education and caring go hand in hand. It's not just caring for children, it's educating and educating children. And so we try to focus on that and really prepare them and get them to recognize that relationships with their families is key. Children from birth to 5 can do nothing alone. They can't do anything without a big person. And so the more we work with whoever their big person is, whoever their family member is, the better off the outcomes are for both the children and the family. So we try to highlight ways to really partner and build strong relationships with families.
That's beautiful. And on a personal note, I have a 4-year-old and firmly understand the need to build that relationship with families. My wife and I are consistently in contact with the lead teacher as well as the assistant as well, to ensure that we have a full understanding of what's happening. One other thing I want to touch on here really quickly is that I love the fact that you spoke about and acknowledged that foundationally teachers must have a love for children and a care for them, but they also must have those technical skills to educate them, because the love alone is not going to get it done. Right. The love alone is not going to get this child to be fully literate by the 3rd grade. So really appreciate that and wanted to uplift those particular pieces, as well as share a little bit about me. All right, so thank you all so much for sharing. Now let's kind of continue the conversation about digging into the meat of it. So let's start or continue our conversation focused on a national perspective. And we've talked a little bit about this, but let's dig in a little bit more here. So lately, there's been a widespread interest in the science of reading, as we talked a little bit about now. And so we know that many states, including DC, are really looking at third grade proficiency in reading being lower than we would like. So I was wondering if from each of your roles, could talk a little bit more, continue the conversation around that science of reading. And also how it shows up, I should say. So kind of a twofold thing here.
I can start. So for several years, at least 7 or 8 years, DC Public Schools has had an intentional, strategic plan around aligning to the science of reading and making sure that, our theory of action is that if our educators and our leaders know and understand the research behind the science of reading, the implications for what classroom instruction should look like, and coupled with aligning our resources. So, making sure that we're adopting science of reading aligned foundational skills resources, as well as practices. So our needs-based small group instruction, et cetera, all the things. And that's definitely specific to K2, or has been specific to K2 for the last several years. Then we should see increased student outcomes. And we are realizing that in our student data. I can't wait for the next council meeting when we can publicly share what our EOY data that we just got reviewed, but the impact is happening, right? So more of our students learn to read. From my role specifically, I kind of sit as a liaison across multiple teams that have hands in literacy, and making sure that not only is there alignment, but also coherence. And so more and more of that has had me involved with our early childhood education team to make sure that across pre-K 12 now, so I'll also be digging into foundational literacy in secondary space, that we're all aligned and that the initiatives are that there's coherence across, and there's this vertical alignment as to what we're doing. And so our ECE team specifically have been digging into structured literacy and science of reading, and PDing our internal teams as well as their teachers, right? So the ball is rolling there, and they've been really thinking about what does it mean to teach aligned to science of reading in the ECE space that also doesn't just sort of pull down K2 practices into the pre-K space. So that has been what we have been grappling with, and making sure that principals and coaches and teachers understand that it is just not like a pick up and plop into pre-K 3 and 4, and making sure that teachers really understand what the implications of science of reading are. So that has been a lot of what I've been doing. I can just give you one really quick example, and then I'll drop the mic on that. We have what's called Readers Next Door, a Readers Next Door initiative, and it is a beloved program. We have created our own decodable text. Decodables are a evidence-based resource to use to ensure that students learn to decode effectively. And they are rooted in DC. The characters look like our students. You'll see Ben Chilibol in some of those books. And so I have managed that program, and we have teachers writing and illustrating the books. And so now we are up to 2nd grade, and they'll be good in classrooms actually this fall. And so what we're thinking about in the ECE space is, what does that look like for big books? Right? How can we create big books because the thing with science of reading is there is research around how literacy is developed for most students, right? And that's what science of reading is, this culmination of that research. But also we've got to put this layer of culture responsive literacy instruction as well, and making sure that students can see themselves in the texts that are being read to them, as well as that they are reading. And so that is the next sort of part of the project that I've been thinking about, is how can we have our DCPS decodables in our pre-K classrooms, and so that teachers are reading these big books, and so it's all the things. So it's a lot of excitement there. And so just wanted to give you an idea of how science of reading lives in my role. It's these big initiatives around increasing implementation in really exciting ways. So
Can I go, because I have to transition soon?
Yes, you have it.
Thank you. And I will I'll give myself 3 minutes. It's 10:46. I'll be done at 10:49. Okay. So in our early childhood education world and in our CDA world, right, we are, quote, governed, unquote, by the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NACE, in the field of early childhood education. And so while the science of reading, many of us believe in it, we talk about the concept of developmentally appropriate, right? About maybe 30 years ago, NACE came in and just, they disrupted reading. I was in graduate school when it happened. They disrupted reading programs that worked because they claimed they were not developmentally appropriate. And so for years, there were a lot of children who were not getting what they needed to get at home, and we developed a nation of non-readers. So in our role, I have to give a shout out to my amazing colleague, Dr. Vivian Vasquez. Woo woo, she is phenomenal. In our role, we know about the science of reading. It is very important, but we are also early childhood educators. So we marry the two. But as I've heard on here, the most critical thing is absolutely early childhood education is phenomenal, but those teachers have to understand, we have to train those early childhood education teachers in some components of that, so that when the children go on from preschool to kindergarten and first grade, if it's in DCPS, there is no void, there is no chasm, right? And so one of the things that we work on is putting in the concepts of the science of reading in a manner that is very, very developmentally appropriate. It's not top down. It is prescriptive, but it's also descriptive, and it is also co-constructive with the teachers. So those are some critical things that I think are important. As you said, as you said, if you go into a preschool classroom and everyone is sitting at their desk, right, doing amazing stuff, you need to run. It's like, be scared, right? Because it's a complete, but at the same time, there are things that they need to be able to move on from one level to the next. If we can do it for math, we should be able to do it for reading.
I couldn't agree more with you, Dr. T. And I'll just share really briefly. So at Martha's Table, again, I mentioned we're an early care and education operator. We created a Strong by 8 curriculum that focuses on reading and numerical literacy, and it's really to support children to be successful while they're with us and of course thereafter. As we know, if a child doesn't have a strong foundation, they're constantly playing catch up with their peers. And since we serve those young people between ages 6 weeks to age 4, we know how essential it is for us to support them in building that foundation, and it really puts them on that pathway to success in kindergarten and beyond there. So just wanted to share a little bit about MT, but I welcome Dominique. I see you nodding there like you're ready to jump in. So please, the mic is yours, my lady.
Now, I just hearing both Shareen and Dr. Fashola talking about bridging the components. For so long, childcare and early care and has just been completely separate from elementary school education. Now that there are, particularly in DC, pre-K3 and pre-K4 programs, it moves it a little bit closer, but there still needs to be more intentional work done to connect 0 to 5, the 0 to 5 period or the 0 to 3 period to elementary school, so that it is more of a stream, more consistent, so that our teachers are doing the pre-work intentionally and specifically, knowing what's ahead. There is a huge disconnect between childcare and early care in the school system. And I think it just slows down progress, because it's not like children all of a sudden are 5. They've been somewhere. They've been somewhere. Most children have been somewhere, be it their family's house or a childcare center, for those first 5 years. So they can't just pop up in school and think that's where it's going to start. Think that's where they're going to get the knowledge that they need to be successful by 3rd grade. That's the thing. Nothing's going to be successful in 3rd grade unless it's a steady motion, a steady movement, not just, oh, we got it in 3rd grade. It just doesn't work like that. And we need to pay more attention to that.
Here. And we are joining you and others in that fight to get our young people ready for that third grade. So moving on, Kristen, I want to come back to you here. Mississippi is rightfully so being portrayed as a huge success story in raising literacy achievement. Can you tell us about some of the policies and practices that have brought so much success? And, really, what was the driver really behind this movement? So if you could share a little bit more about that, it'd be awesome. Have we lost Kristen? It appears.
I think I'm back. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you now and see.
Okay, technology is something. Either. So, okay. Okay, will you ask your question again, David?
Absolutely, no problem at all. Those internet gremlins were getting up in there, but that's okay. Here we go. So the question was if you could tell us some of the policies and practices that have brought so much success in the state of Mississippi.
Yes. So one thing we did in Mississippi is we knew that we had to create a shared vision to improve literacy outcomes. And my colleagues just talked about the disconnect between preschool and the elementary setting. So we try to create this common language that involved our preschool teachers, our professors and pre-service candidates, all the way up to our elementary teachers, even our K-8 special education teachers. So we try to really be inclusive of what we did in Mississippi in creating this common language as one of our strategies. But our policies really in Mississippi drove the implementation and our strategy. So we have our early learning collaboratives act that came into place in 2013, which established our first state-funded pre-K programs in underserved areas. These early learning collaborative, or this act, allocated funds for communities, including school district, Head Start sites, childcare centers, and nonprofits, to establish or expand high-quality early child health care programs. Right now in the state of Mississippi, we have 37 early learning collaboratives across our state that provide high-quality early childhood education pre-K programs to 4-year-old students. The total state appropriation for our Early Learning Collaborative Act so far is around $78 million that's been invested in those programs. In addition, another policy or a key piece of legislation we have in Mississippi is our Literacy-Based Promotion Act, which in Mississippi eliminated social promotion and really focused on improving reading skills for students kindergarten through third grade. A part of that Literacy-Based Promotion Act is our kindergarten readiness assessment. And this is kind of the bridge that you all were talking about, because with our kindergarten readiness assessment, our pre-K students take that assessment as well. And that assessment is taken at the beginning of the year and end of the year to measure readiness and growth. So our pre-K students take it, and then they take it again in kindergarten to measure readiness and growth. And then we have our dyslexia legislation that really started prior to all of this other legislation in 1997, but has recently been updated, and provisions have been added to it to provide school choice for students with dyslexia grades 1st through 12. And then it requires the adoption policies to screen students for dyslexia as early as kindergarten. Most recently, we added to our legislation awareness training for our instructional assistants or our instructional support staff, as well as our certified teachers. So we added that component. But in Mississippi, we know that a piece of legislation or a policy is only as good as its implementation. So with our Literacy-Based Promotion Act, we really focus on on prevention and intervention over retention. So there are 6 big buckets of work that we really focus on. Educator training, creating a common language across pre-service teachers, our preschool teachers, our elementary school teachers, and leaders through our statewide literacy professional development. That statewide literacy professional development is grounded in the science of reading. It's grounded in those theoretical models that I mentioned earlier, the simple view of reading and Scarborough's rope. It really parses out, even at the early childhood level, the word reading, how phonological awareness and decoding works together to build the automaticity students need. What does that oral language look like and needed for those early pre-grades before students get in to elementary school. So we offer that training to our teachers, to our leaders, to our pre-service teachers and our preschool teachers, but also a component of that is, it's one thing to offer blanket professional development across the state. That's one step. But our professional development model in Mississippi, I would say it's a triangulated model. So we have our statewide literacy professional development. We have regional professional development, and I spoke to my colleagues about this yesterday, where we take our statewide professional development and parse it out in chunks to regional training to really look at what is the application of that. How can I, as a teacher, apply that to my classroom of 6-year-olds? And so that's what happens in our regional training. We're really focused and strategic on the application, structured literacy. How do we apply the science? And then the other part of the triangle is coaching. So professional development, the regional professional development, you have to have as a teacher what we've seen that has been majorly impactful to our reading outcomes for our student is the coaching. We place coaches in our lowest performing schools across the state of Mississippi. They're there for an entire year. They work side by side with teachers to build that capacity and sustainability. So now I have a person that I can lean on to help me model, to help me co-teach, to really help me reflect on and be diagnostic in my approach to instruction and assessment of students. And then we have, again, the early identification through our kindergarten readiness assessment. We have a really robust parent communication strategy. So at the state level, we have regional parent nights. And we talk to our parents about literacy. We talk to them about the law. We talk to them about screening, because our law says that our students in kindergarten through 3rd grade have to be screened 3 times a year with our universal screening, in addition to dyslexia screening. So that's in addition to the dyslexia screening. And parents have to be notified if there's a deficiency. And then an individual reading plan has to be developed for those students that follows them and should be tweaked, and the parents are involved. We also have a strong readers website for our parents that offer activities that they can do for their students from birth to grade 5, but also questions parents need to ask their child's teacher. And then our individual reading plans, and then our focus really is on prevention over retention. We do have a 3rd grade reading assessment that our students have to take. They do get multiple retest opportunities, and there are some good cause exemptions, but we know we have to do the preventative things up front. We have to make sure we really screen and be diagnostic and give students what they need on the front end so that they are prepared and proficient when they're leaving 3rd grade.
Wow. Well, thanks so much for that detailed response about the policies and practices that have really been integral to success. So you talked a bit about the early learning collaborative networks, 30 some odd from what I don't recall the exact number, and the $78 million invested. That's incredible. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the barriers that you all overcame in building these networks and getting access to that amount of funding to bring to light all of the amazing work that you talked about.
So some of the barriers that we started to experience were that our teachers, we were building the knowledge of our teachers, but we didn't have a laser light focus on our leader. So we had to make sure that we were providing the same amount of professional development and coaching, because across our Department of Ed, we have multiple cadres of coaches. So we have our early childhood coaches, we have literacy coaches that focus on our elementary schools, kindergarten through fourth grade. We have school improvement coaches that really work with our leaders in our schools. And so we had to really make sure that we were speaking a common language when it came to coaching. So we all go through the same type of training. We all understand what the feedback loop and coaching cycle looks like. And then we all been given the training that's grounded in the science. So there's this continuation across early childhood, and then our school improvement coaches that work specifically with our leaders. We do continue that training with our leaders. We try to make sure that our regional professional development, some of that we offer right now is specific to our leaders, because we have to build their capacity as well. And we know that research says that leaders are second when we're looking at school related impacts on student achievement, they're second to teachers. So we have to make sure our leaders have the same amount of knowledge and they're able to really look into the classrooms and make sure things are getting done and there's some accountability there. We also had to move into this space at the beginning, I think, and we're still navigating it a little bit, where our Department of Ed and most Department of Eds are looked at as compliance arms in the state. So we had to do a shift in being perceived as a compliance agency. So we were just going out to make sure schools were following accreditation standards, or they made sure things were in place. But we have moved and shifted to a support arm. So when we first went out and deployed our coaches, that was something that we really had to work on, was building relationships, because you can't coach a teacher or you can't coach a principal if their trust is not there, and if you don't first focus on building that relationship. So we really had to try to shift the perception of us as a state agency being viewed as a compliance arm, and now we're moving into this support space where we really want to support you. We want to build your knowledge. We want to, because we know that if we do that, then you have a direct impact on literacy and student achievement in your buildings, schools, and districts.
Thank you so much for that. So Dr. Fernanders and Dr. Fashola, I want to come to you and kind of bring it back home in a sense. So hearing what Kristen shared about the network and ecosystem in Mississippi, what parts of that do you think we already have in place here in DC, and where do you all think we might have some room to improve?
Listening to Kristen was like, I was like, we're living dual lives at the same time, because a lot of the work that we've done at DC public schools, and I can speak specifically to DCPS versus like the work other LEAs, charters, et cetera, in DC have been doing, but specific to DCPS, we have engaged in a lot of those initiatives. And I would say that if I were to think back to 10 years ago, we spent a lot of our time around a few stakeholders within the central office, deepening our understanding of research, right? And then ensuring that our curricular resources were aligned. And it kind of stopped there. So 2 levers of all the things that you shared, Kristen, is a lot that we've been doing in those spaces as well. But 2 levers that we've pulled in the last few years, where we've seen like acceleration happen like a bullet, has been around leadership learning, like really reestablishing leaders as leaders of literacy. So that's been one. And by leaders, I'm talking about all the way up and down sort of the hierarchy, for lack of a better way. So engaging our instructional superintendents as leaders of literacy, our school leaders, as well as those in the central office who are planning for all that we are providing to schools and the guidance that we're giving to schools. And so we've centered those leaders. So I led for the last 3 years, I've led a science of reading related instructional superintendent leadership learning series. And that has happened monthly. Yeah. And so I lead that series around specific topics, digging into different parts of Scarborough's rope. This year we're launching into language comprehension. So there's going to be a lot of engagement with our ECE team just around like oral language development, vocabulary, etc. So that's been one really key lever. And the way that we are marrying or really bridging research to practice and understanding that is we're exploring the research, but we're doing that in schools. So we do it in person and we're in schools and we're talking about, so what does this look like in practice, right? What are the implications? And then we are actually together doing learning walks. So we do our learning, we talk about what it should look like, our look for, and then we're going to ECE, K to 2, 3 to 5 classrooms. We typically do this in, we call them educational centers where there's like pre-K through 8. So we're able to sort of go into a variety of spaces and think about implications there. And what's happened, why that has been such a key lever is because the instructional superintendents in DCPS specifically supervise principals and clusters of schools. And so when they understand what they should be saying in schools, they are better, more equipped to ensure that principals and what they're seeing in classrooms are aligned to that. And when there's a detour, I'm thinking about like schools that are still like beholden to balanced literacy or guided reading, et cetera. When we have sort of the principal supervisors able to speak to this isn't research aligned, we're seeing much more movement there. So that's been a lever. And in the way that we've centered principals as leaders of literacy, we have taken principals on learning walks through schools where structured literacy is happening really effectively and it's showing up in the data, and not only the data for like general data, but also in our subgroup data. So like students who are learning English as a second language, right? Our students with disabilities and all of those intersectional identities, that has been important. And we just finished up our second year of our Principal Literacy Institute. And we did that in collaboration with American University as well. And launching our focus on language comprehension. So it feels like we've done a lot of things along the way, but once we thought about school leaders and central leaders, like centrally located leaders, supervisory leaders, as leaders of literacy, and like built their knowledge base and honor them as continued, learners in this, we've seen such a shift. So that's lever one. But lever two has been our central office leaders in the way that we strategically plan. In my role, it has been engaging all of the folks that we feel like touch literacy, right? So a lot of the strategic planning has been focused in on the English language arts team, right? Like that makes sense. But what about ECE, right? Directors and managers. What about the team that focuses on English learners and the team that focuses on students with disabilities? They had not been intentionally or as intentionally involved in receiving the PD, thinking about it, thinking about science of reading through the lens of, the students that they are hyper-focused on. And so once we sort of pulled in those leaders and, I'm looking at the coherence around what is the messaging you're giving to teachers in pre-Ks 3 and 4 versus what we're saying in K2, for example, or SPED teachers versus what we're saying to general education classroom teachers, making sure all of that is, there's a shared understanding, and in the different ways that has to happen, whether it's we're all in the same PDs or we're sort of looking at and giving feedback on the guidance, guidance documents, et cetera. And that's still continuing, but I can say that has been another lever, because sort of once we had those conversations internally as leaders, system leaders within the office, then the various teams that aren't don't only focus on literacy, for example, but do touch literacy, we're able to start thinking about, so what does this look like for us for the next 5 years, for what our teachers need, even for what we need. Like, I don't know what the science of reading is, for example, right? Or things I might have heard from directors. So what learning do I need to have? Because if I'm planning for hundreds of teachers, but I don't understand the research myself, then that's an issue, right? And are our resources aligned, right? If we're still sending, I don't know if I should call out like names of products, but if we're still sending specific, like purchasing and sending specific products that are misaligned to research, because that's just sort of what we know, and we don't know that this is misaligned, then, you know, it's sending a very disconnected message. So honoring school leaders and supervisors of school leaders as leaders of literacy, as well as making sure there's coherence across all the different intersectional identities and the people that support that of our students have been two levers that I would add on that we've been doing at DC.
Thank you for that, Dr. Fernanders. You very organically started talking about some of the pain points that you guys recognize, but wanted to give you another minute or so to maybe dig in on that a little bit more if you wanted to uplift any specific, any additional specific pain points or provide more context to what you've shared thus far.
Yeah, I think, pain points. So, you know, students, no identity is a monolith, right? So like when we're thinking about student data, oftentimes we're thinking about like students in kindergarten, right? And then Black student data, and then English learners, right? Or students with disabilities. But all of the variables and factors that inform whether or not I'm going to struggle as a reader are so much more layered. And teachers know, you all who are in classrooms with your students, you know that there's so many more factors that inform how well a student is going to do academically, right? Those adverse factors. So as a district, we've also really leaned into whole child student-centered planning, diagnosing, and supporting for students. And so that has also been a pain point, right? Because there's so many layers to this. So it's like, are our educators able to diagnose need, right? Are we providing the like really effective tools for them to do that? Do I understand the research? And so what are we providing teachers and leaders to help them understand the research? Do we have the right materials, right? Like there's a materials war out here. You know, there's so many things you can choose. Is it high quality, et cetera? And then when I finally have like the right material, my district has given me the guidance about what to do. And then I have the student in front of me. Do I know how to respond in a moment when the student is like, when it just doesn't seem like it's making an impact? And so the way that the professional development and training that we provide teachers to do that has been, I would say, the pain point, because there's so much to learn. Yeah. So if I am the new teacher and I am in, I have to know about developing oral language, developing like early math skills, supporting like self-regulation, right? Like social emotional learning, like all the things, and knowing what to prioritize, I would say has been something that is that we're grappling with. Thing two is who all needs to know what when, right? So we've started to prioritize senior leadership and school leaders, and we have almost pretty much a one-to-one model, at least in our K-5 or K-8 schools, for instructional coaches, right? But if I'm an instructional coach of kindergarten, for example, to grade 5, there's so many different there's so many different things I need to be an expert on and be in classrooms and supporting teachers, systems and structures, content, etc. That has been a pain point. Again, it's just figuring out like, what do we prioritize? What's the urgency? Who do we PD first? And then it's not only about providing the PD, but it's that job embedded coaching and training to make sure that teachers are effectively applying what they've learned. So you sit in a PD session, but like, can I turnkey that and actually make an impact on students? And so that's what we're working through. So we're trying a few different like pilot initiatives about what that could look like to bridge. So in trainings, bridging research to practice for teachers. And so, yeah, we're continuing a work around that for sure.
I love it. I love it. So Dominique, I wanted to come to you next, and specifically kind of building upon what Dr. Fernandez mentioned, specifically about it being a material war. So I was curious to know from your perspective, what are some resources available to educators themselves, as well as center directors who are trying to support their teachers and staff with this big flow of information? Tell us a little bit more about what you see as some of those resources that are really integral to that development.
Sure. So we try to again emphasize family connection. And so the resources that we use most often really speak to the early years as a partnership. And it really gives information on how to make sort of the simple everyday things you're learning, and how to really focus in on the play as learning, so that parents and staff aren't having to create this whole other system on top of the caring. So it intertwines caring for children, young children, it intertwines the education component, and it intertwines things that families can do as well. So some of the resources we use are 0 to 3, and it's a national organization that focuses on children from 0 to 3. And so they have tons of programming, literature, curriculum supports for both families and teachers that help them focus on 0 to 3. And it's the range, it's literacy, it's math, it's social emotional building, it's science and social studies. And so because they focus on that specific age group, it has proven to be a great help. And that's just 0to3.org. We also use right here in our own backyard, the DC Public Library. The DC Public Library is an excellent resource for early literature and literacy and language for young children. They will have librarians come out to your center. There's always programming at the library. They have a specific program called STAR, which is Sing, Talk, and Read, that just focuses on how do families and teachers build literacy and language in the very young learners. And so we use DC Public Library as a huge resource. We also use NACCE a lot because NACCE focuses on birth through 8. And they also have a lot of focus on partnering with families and working with families and bridging the homeschool gap. And so NACCE is the National Association of Educating Young Children, or NACCE.org. I'm sorry, DC Library is dclibrary.org. And then we use the National Black Child Development Institute, which is a national organization that focuses specifically on, again, the care and educating and raising of young children. Although the focus is on Black children, they include information on all children, particularly all children of color, and just balancing cultural components that people raising children of color face that sometimes are different than other situations. And so the combination of the cultural components, the socioeconomic components, the education components really come through in that particular organization. So those are the things we recommend. We also recommend just lots of, usually, this is going to sound weird, but social media has tons of information. And it is in brief snippets, which is what most people can stand at this point in time. Just brief snippets of information that help you get to a bigger source of information. So looking at some of these influencers and these content creators and seeing kind of like what matches your experience and what matches your ideas and your philosophies, and using them as a base to then do more research, I have found has been a really great tool for sort of this age of like millennials and Generation Z parents, and even Generation X parents and teachers. Like, there's a lot of information out there. Use the tools you have to weed through it. Make learning fun is what we say. Like, children should come to school and just have a good time. And within those good times, you can definitely have structured instruction and structured activities so that you are getting to certain outputs. But keep it appropriate, and keep it on a level that doesn't stress you out, because once a teacher is stressed, then it goes the neighborhood.
That's it right there. But Dominique, I definitely appreciate that. Some very salient points they're made. Is one I want to uplift and double tap on is the utilization of social media. I think we often only associate negative things with social media, but we must realize that, again, that it can be a resource and a viable one. So in terms of time, we're now at 11:22. We have one final question left, but maybe want to open it up for a few questions and answers, questions from the audience, if there are any, and maybe use our final few moments on that front. So if there are any questions, we welcome you all that are in the audience to open your mics and pose those questions.
David, can I make a quick comment?
You certainly can, Dr. T. My apologies, and welcome back. Hopefully you're okay there.
Thank you. No, I've been on.
Oh.
I've just not been visible.
No secret.
Yeah. I just wanted to, give a lift up to our partnership with Martha's Table and with Trinity University. I think you asked the question about the link, right, and the disconnect, and we are actively doing that in DC through the partnership. We emphasize all that we emphasize in the CDA program. The way the CDA program works is that they get their CDA, then they go on to get their associate's degree, and then they go on to get a bachelor's degree, either in education or early childhood education at Trinity, and then maybe come back to American and get a master's degree. These cohorts of CDA students are getting exactly what we have been saying is lacking, right? So these new cohorts, they are understanding part of the science of reading, exploration, discovery, and all of that, so that when they go to the next stage of their education, which is either the associate's degree or the bachelor's degree, they are coming equipped, right, with what we have said they have not been equipped with all along. So we are starting at the very beginning. And I just wanted to put that out there, that the AEEC, I hope I got that right, is a mover and a shaker, and is taking note of all that's not going on, and we are actively implementing that in our program and moving it along. And those students, as I said, will move on to Trinity and or to AU, but when they get here, that void will not be there. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I will mute myself.
No. I appreciate you big up in the work that we're doing to address some of the pain points in which we've been talking about today. So looking here at the chat, doesn't look like we have any questions thus far. So maybe with that being the case, we'll go to our final question, which I'll pose, and in advance I'll ask, just so we have additional moment or two for questions, if you could just give a few thoughts here on these items, our panelists, and again, we'll close this out there following. So the question is, what can DC do as a system, whether it be OSCE, DME, private philanthropy, individual organizations, to do two things? One, be a part of the national conversation on literacy, and two, address some of the pain points in reading instruction and supports for educators.
So I'm just going to say, start younger. Start with infants, start with prenatal care, connect families a little bit more.
Wow.
I think exactly what we're doing with this panel. Like this last year, I've been on more panels than ever in my life. But I have been able to really make connections across regions, states, etc., so that we are not recreating wheels, and we're building this cohort of leaders that are more effectively supporting our educators. So definitely continue to get outside of our silo as a district and learn from others.
Wow, couldn't agree more. I guess if I could add to this, definitely would be to share our learning successes and even our failures. And I know that failures may be difficult to do, but again, it's imperative. Dr. Fernanders, you talked about not recreating wheels and building communities and sustaining communities. And I think that comes with sharing what's happening on the good and the bad. I'll go to Dr. Fashola and then we'll close out with Kristen.
Is it final words?
Yes, ma'am. We're just about at time. Time ends for us 11:30.
I'm saying empower the students to become, to take hold of learning, empower the students to ask questions, to say, I don't understand, and listen to student voices and appreciate student voices as we teach, because they are some of our best teachers.
Wow. Wow. Well, Kristen, you have the final word.
So I would say we have to continuously educate at all stakeholder levels, especially our families. And, you know, our family makeup looks a lot different. And so we have to make sure, because, you know, in Mississippi and in other states, you may not have the traditional family raising a child. So there may be a grandparent that's responsible, or an aunt and uncle. So we have to approach it as a families as partners approach, but then really educating on our families on what's happening in our schools, helping them to understand even the theoretical frameworks within the science and what it takes for students to acquire reading. And if they're having difficulties, being approachable and understanding parents don't know as much as we do as educators, and helping them to understand how they can really help their students at home, and being able to really help them navigate that space. So I would say as much as possible, really taking the time to educate our parents, and then our pre-service teachers at our institutes of higher learning. In Mississippi, all of our teachers don't come from one particular institute, and I'm pretty sure in DC, all of our teachers don't come from American University. So you have to we really need to, as a nation, really look at our prep programs, because we're spending a lot of money. I'm just speaking as a college student, parents are spending lots of money to send students to college, and then leaving college, going into the classroom, and then you have to completely be retrained on how to teach reading. You know, what are we doing at the collegiate level to make sure that students are getting what they need and are ready when they leave the class, go into the classroom as in-service teachers to teach students how to read day one. And so those are some things that I think we all can work on improving.
Thank you so much for that point. A beautiful one to kind of sum up this conversation today. It's clear from this conversation, there are immediate next steps we can take on an individual and at the systems level. For instance, as we were just talking about, providing educators and administrators the resources they need to be successful. This was one of many takeaways from today's conversation. Related to teacher prep and supporting educators, as Dr. T mentioned a few moments ago, our Advancing Early Education Collaborative Partners, American University, Trinity Washington University, Lift DC, and Martha's Table are here and ready to provide any additional information. So if you're interested in learning more about this program or just tapping into these resources, let us know. Again, just want to personally thank you all for giving me this space to moderate. I've enjoyed myself. I've learned quite a bit, and want to thank you all for being here, and wish you all the best in your work in our communities to support our earliest learners. Thank you so much again for your time, and I wish you all a great weekend. I'll turn it over back to Olga to close us out, I guess. Thank you again.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone. You all have provided us with great information, a wonderful insight. I really thank you all for your time and efforts with supporting providers, teachers, colleagues, even college students to have that forefront of support. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. If anyone has any last comments, questions, anything like that, please say this now before we disconnect the call. I don't see anyone.
I'll just say I put my contact information in the chat. If you want to be connected with anyone or want more information, feel free to reach out at any time. We'd love to hear any feedback or connect you with any resources that might be helpful.
Big shout out to Youth Invest Partners for convening this, and panelists, you all are amazing. Thank you all so much again for your time.
A huge round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well deserved. Well deserved. Y'all take care. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.